I want to talk to you today about the evolution of diversity management as a management theory. I think the time is now. For the last 25 years, diversity management has been a dormant management theory. The time has come to translate that theory into practice because we need it. I spent a fair amount of time over the last several years looking at why and how management theories get translated into practical everyday use. Here's what I've come up with. First of all, practice trumps theory, but theory always precedes practice. So the cycle that I've come up with looks like this. First of all, there's a theory. Some brilliant scholar comes up with an idea about how to manage organizations more effectively. When they unroll this theory to the rest of the world, there's generally acceptance and excitement about it. Then people start to explaining it and to justifying it by using rhetoric. Rhetoric is a way to reposition it so that it makes sense to more people. But rhetoric is not results. After a while, we get into a wait and see mode. We look to see, the theory is out there, so what are we doing with it, and is it making a difference? And after we discover that it's really not making a difference, then rejection sets in. Rejection looks like, let's put it on the shelf for a while, and let's move on with business as usual. Some management theories have sat on the shelf for up to 40 years. But then a need arises. Let me emphasize this. The reason they come off the shelf is because a need arises. Something happens in the marketplace, and that particular theory turns out to be the way to address. People go back to it, get it, polish it off, develop tools to use it, and refurbish it. As a result, the theory gets revived, and practical ways of using it get developed. A classic example of this is scientific management. You should remember back in the early 20th century, a principle called scientific management was introduced by Frederick Taylor. It was all the rave at the time. It was the way to improve manufacturing, to improve cycle times within the manufacturing process. Well, when the Hawthorne studies came along, they proved that strictly mechanical ways of looking at business would not work because you got human beings. And so scientific management kind of fell by the wayside for a while, for about 40 years, as I pointed out, in favor of the more humanistic theories of management, taking into account how people respond to management. Well, in the 1980s, the Japanese discovered something that they called total quality, which was an outgrowth of scientific management. And they began introducing products into the American market, which actually worked. And we found out that people liked them. And so American industry had to respond. There was a need. Their response was, let's go back and get what we already know. And that is the principle of scientific management, repackaged into total quality management, into Six Sigma, into lean manufacturing, into process re-engineering, all based on the same theory of management. Another example of that is from the humanistic, the human capital management standpoint. Also in the middle of the 20th century, you'll remember that people like Abraham Maslow and Peter Drucker, Hertzberg and McGregor all came up with theories about how to manage people more effectively. Maslow's work in particular was of interest to me because for a long time it was highly acceptable and very interesting to people. The hierarchy of need and his unique approach to managing people differently was something that had gained a little gravitas. Well, for about 40 years it sat on the shelf because people couldn't see that it was actually making a difference. Well, what happened is with the advent of the knowledge worker, with the advent of globalization, all of a sudden Maslow's principles are back in vogue. People like Warren Bennis and others revived it and made it into the way to manage organizations, particularly from a people standpoint. Why? Because they needed it. The advent of the knowledge worker made Maslow's principles a necessity in the workplace. Now comes this thing called diversity management. This theory was put on the table around 1985 by a brilliant young scholar by the name of Dr. Roosevelt Thomas. The whole idea of diversity management was, hey folks, the world has changed. The demographics have changed, the psychographics have changed. I wonder if organizations are equipped to manage a new mix of employee and a new mix of consumer. The answer, of course, is that we probably weren't. There was a lot of excitement about diversity management back in the mid-'80s. Avon and other leading-edge companies adopted it. It rolled out. There was a lot of articles about it. There was a great deal of enthusiasm about it. But then people began asking the question, what can we do with it? How can we use it to make our results better? And so guess what? It has also been rejected and put on the shelf. But now things are changing. A need is arising so that diversity management is now a necessary tool. So it has been rejected, but there is a new reality. A new need has arisen. The fact is that diversity has grown by leaps and bounds in the marketplace. We have more diverse people in our workplace. We have more diverse people in our marketplace. And we're not just talking about identity diversity. We're talking about cognitive diversity and diversity of perspective. So the mix of employees has changed. Customers are changing dramatically. People have begun to experiment with diversity management. There is now enough scientific and practical evidence to demonstrate that diversity itself is the essential ingredient to getting better performance, higher productivity, more innovation, better problem solving, better decision making. All of these things have been scientifically proved to come out of a more diverse mix of people. So these facts can no longer be ignored. The need is now. The need has arisen to unleash the value of a multifunctional, multidisciplinary, multiracial, multigender workforce and marketplace. Those facts cannot be denied. So now is the time for us to revive the theory of diversity management and to develop practical ways of using it so that managers and organizations have a tool that allows them to even more effectively manage the people and the processes in their businesses. Deliberate diversity is intended to be just such a tool. It is designed for use in the field. It is designed for use by managers in every aspect of the business. It is a way for them to systematically and methodically take advantage of the diverse population of people that they have to deal with, both as employees and as consumers. To fully take advantage of the cognitive diversity of perspectives that are available to them. So globalization, increasing complexity, shifting demographics, the advent of the knowledge worker have created a new need in the marketplace. Diversity management is the right theory to address those needs, and deliberate diversity is the right set of tools to translate that theory into practice. The time is now. Diversity management is the new solution as a management theory to be put into practice.